Folks, happy Friday. Welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson at JRob from MN on Twitter. I'm here with my partner in crime.
Good morning or good afternoon when you're listening. Todd Peterson here. And Jason, for all of our viewers here, I got a new hat today and a new shirt. It is a little cold. I don't normally wear a t-shirt, but folks, the American Tribune Storm is live. I miss the America that I grew up in. Check out the hat, check out the shirt, check out the other merch we got at our store here. Excited to roll that out and offer that to you.
Oh, yeah. Todd, what's the name of that website again?
TheAmericanTribuneStore.com. It's a little lengthy as you type it in there, but you won't be disappointed once you make it.
Yeah. And I got to say, I'd love to give a shout out to our subscribers and our viewers. We continue every week picking up more viewers, picking up more followers on our show, on our Substack. And our ask is going to be share this content and really share with somebody you might not politically agree with. Because like today, we're going to go in deep diving into the Joe Biden stuff. We're going to talk about the border security bill and how it's tied to Ukraine. We're going to end up talking about the Supreme Court decision. And I guarantee these are not topics that the mainstream media has given the proper coverage to. And for anybody out there saying, hey, Todd, I gotta start with kind of a funny story. So my English teacher, Mr. Yost, shout out to Mr. Yost, crazy hippie liberal.
Weekly shout out, Mr. Yost. Hope you're watching.
Yeah, someday he's going to tune in. And when I was growing up, he was a hippie. And people loved him because he was a little crazy. And I share this link on my Facebook page. And every time I share the link, he comes back with, "You're a crazy fascist Nazi, blah, 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 blah." And he was asking me, part of the inspiration for this episode, when we're going to talk about how broken the justice system is, he's like, "You probably don't even know about Jean E. Carroll and what Trump did, blah, 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 blah." I'm like, this guy clearly has no idea. Just to put in perspective, Todd is Mr. How many hours do you watch a C-SPAN a day, Todd?
I mean, 2, 3, 4, you name it, folks. I'm on C-SPAN a lot.
Right. I am the read the judgment guy. So like the border bill they released, 370 some pages, read that. When the Joe Biden report that came out yesterday, it was like 200-300 pages, read that. It's funny, my wife gets home from work. She's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, they released a special counsel report on so-and-so." So when Todd and I talk about expressing opinions and what we think, it's not like, hey, I saw some talking head say this. We actually go to the government website, pull the document, read the document. It was funny with Mr. Yost because the Jean E. Carroll stuff, like I've read what was available in the court documents and actually gone through it. And just for the record, if you ever want to go, and sometime we could do an episode on it, but some of these platforms won't like it. It was 30 years ago. The lady didn't know what season of the year it happened in. I'm always skeptical when you never press criminal charges, because if you just do civil charges and not criminal charges, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird.
30 years later, by the way, not when it happened.
Right. And actually, just one quick topic on that before we hop into our first topic. This week, Trump's appeal got turned down. And what's interesting is there was a big Democrat donor and George Conway, who is a never Trumper. They worked with the New York legislature to change the laws to allow you to sue people civilly, even though the statute of limitations was up. And they reached out to Jean E. Carroll to get her to start this lawsuit. They paid for the lawsuit. And then the Trump team asked for all the communication between them until, like, neither one are her attorney. It's not privileged. Ironically, all that stuff was deleted, Todd.
Weird. It's kind of like the Secret Service deleted text messages, allegedly, about an event a couple of years ago, too. It's weird how that always disappears, Jason.
Right, yeah. You know, and I guarantee you, if Donald Trump had deleted a text, what do you think would have happened to Donald Trump?
Just one text. He'd probably be in the gulags right now with you and me.
Mm-hmm.
But Jason, I really want to focus on a point here. You and I spend a lot of time with the primary documents, let's say C-SPAN, the court documents. This is where the information is coming from. Even the big interview that dropped last night, you and I watched it in its entirety so we could come to our own conclusions and not see what CNN or even Fox News or whatever these media outlets are saying about it. We go to the source, we take a listen. But folks, if you're not on Twitter, you probably don't know a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, because that really is where all the news is coming from now as well. So we get the actual evidence, we go to the documents, but a lot of the stories they're breaking on Twitter nowadays, and if you're not on there, you're not following J-Rob, you're not following me, Tam Trib, you're missing out on a lot of stories here. So the border bill, we got some exposures to go through, some of this Biden documentation, the Trump court case, all this stuff is breaking over there too. So head over there, or folks, head onto our Rumble channel. Eventually, we would love to do some Rumble only events for you folks here, so we could really get into the nitty gritty and not worry about big tech censorship.
Yeah, and you know, the platforms are all interesting. Rumble's our favorite. Technology wise, it's one of the more difficult to work with because we stream on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all
Are
of
we
them.
even streaming on Rumble right now? Is it working, Jason?
It is working. I got it pulled up. We got a handful of people over on Rumble.
Welcome aboard.
But yeah, Rumble is actually much like Twitter or X. It's always going to be Twitter to me. Who am I kidding?
Yeah.
I'm never going to call it X. But Twitter and Rumble are the best free speech platforms that we have. So, folks, today we're going to start out first with talking about the border bill and give you an interpretation of what happened. So the Senate gets together and the Senate pieces together a secure border bill. Ironically, the first thing that you'll notice in the border bill is that while we're sending 20 billion to our border, we're sending 60 billion to Ukraine, 12 billion to Israel, 2 billion to Taiwan. Todd, does it strike you that our border bill is actually tied to funding
another country's border bill? Jason, can I go a step back even and ask, why is it that we have to get a border bill passed? Shouldn't that just be step one when you run a country? All right, we have America. We're going to secure our borders. It shouldn't even take a bill to get to this point, but here we are.
Yeah, and actually, we're going to end this segment talking about the money going to other countries. It is just pure money laundering, and they admit to it in the most bizarre way. We've got a great audio clip that puts it all in
He
perspective.
comes out, he basically says it out loud. We are laundering money to people that keep us in office.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So the actual bill itself, if you take out the supporting other countries and break it down, it is the single worst piece of legislative trash I've ever read. And every time a major piece of legislation is prepared, I usually go read it so that I'm prepared to talk about it, not have just other people's opinions shade it. So first, to understand why the border's broken, Joe Biden did 92 executive orders on his first day in office that either undid Trump executive orders or were new executive orders. So understand that's 100% true. You can go on the whitehouse.gov website and see the Joe Biden executive orders if you want
to. They brag about it. They don't hide the fact that he did all that because he's saving democracy by going through these undemocratic processes.
Right. And I will say, the way it's reported, the media likes to tell you the truth while lying. So they'll say, hey, we need new legislation. 100% true. However, the border was managed for the last 20, 30 years through executive order because the House and Senate can't agree on legislation. So the biggest difference that Joe Biden did is he eliminated the remain in Mexico policy, which meant if you came to seek asylum, you stayed in Mexico until your case was heard. The second thing is he instituted catch and release, which means you come to the border, we have you fill out your paperwork. You're free to go about the country until your court date. The other big thing he did is he gave access to NGOs, which are non-government organizations, for financial assistance to handle the migrants, which is why you keep hearing about them getting money. It's also extended to local governments. The NGOs have taken it a step further, and they're actually going into these third world countries and saying, hey, you should come to America. We got all kinds of free stuff. That's virtually the brochures that they're making. And understand, to be an immigrant like these folks are to America, there's a whole immigration process. We did a whole episode on it, and we love legal immigrants. They see the American way of life. They want to be part of the American dream. They have to work hard to get here. They have to show their worth to the country. The people they're letting in they call them asylum seekers, but essentially they're using refugee clauses. So if you're in a country that's at war, or let's say back in Vietnam where the Hmong population was being killed by the government, those folks, we have asylum. So, hey, I'm being persecuted. They're trying to kill me and my family or other people like me. Come to America. We let you in. This is not my country's broke. My life sucks. I want to come to America. That is not and was never designed to be the program.
Yeah,
Todd?
if it were, I mean, Jason, our country kind of sucks right now in a lot of ways. I'm feeling the pinch with the inflation and the taxes. Can I claim asylum status somehow, even though I'm already a citizen? I think I qualify under the way that all these other guys qualify now.
Yeah, no kidding. So the legislation they passed essentially codified all those Joe Biden executive orders. It did ask for more people to process the claims quicker. It did limit the number of people. This just blows my mind. It limits the number of refugees or asylum seekers to 5,000 a day.
No. Only 5,000, Jason. They are doing America a solid here. They see how bad it is, so they wanted to cap it. That's all they were really doing.
Yeah, so 5,000 a day times 365 days is 1.825 million people. 1.825 million people.
Jason,
Now,
it's worse than that.
what's that?
Are you getting to the worst part? That's not the total number.
Oh, Todd, go for it.
If you read the language of the bill, folks, that only counts for the contiguous southern border. Jason, if I am over in Africa and I come to this country illegally, I don't count towards that 1.8 million.
What? That can't be true, Todd. Wherever did you see that?
Well, Dan Crenshaw told me that only 5,000 a day would get in and then they would stop it. And Jason, if they set the number at 5,000, are you telling me that they now have a system in place to stop everyone else coming in that day? Oh, sorry, it's 4 p.m. We hit our quota today. Sorry, immigrants, turn around. We're going to return you to Mexico. I'm not quite sure how the logistics on this plan even work. But there you go, folks. You can look in the bill yourself. It's hidden in there. It's in this little subsection, probably on page 590. You got to pass the bill to see what's in it first. But if you are not part of the contiguous southern border, there are loopholes and clauses that would allow all of these NGOs and lawyers to say, well, he's not part of this group of 2 million. He's going to be part of an uncounted number of folks that can still come into.
Right. Yeah, and it's crazy because it was actually in a footnote on like page 212, and it's like exemptions. It said exemptions, and then 2 for the footnote. And you go down to the footnote, and it says this number does not include Part 2C, people from non-contiguous. So yeah, and then you go in, the bill gets even more ridiculous. So it moves any jurisdiction for immigrants to the DC court system, so that theoretically, if President Trump wins in 2024, which we're hoping for, and closes the border and starts the largest mass deportation exercise ever, that would be legislated in the DC courtrooms. The other thing.
Hold on, Jason. Just so I understand, you're telling me the courts in DC, are they going to rule fairly? Do they rule with a conservative bent, or what are these courts like in Washington, DC?
Right. Yeah, it's I think the courts in DC hate America. I'll be honest. I know they hate deplorables like us.
Something tells me they're going to side with the illegals every single time.
100%. And then the bill gets even sillier, where they say, oh, if you exceed 5,000, they close the border. Well, you can only close the border X number of days a year, like half the days of the year, and then you can only. And here was what got me with the border part of it. You show up, this law codifies, we have to hire them a lawyer, and we have to pay for them, giving them assistance to settle in until their court case. So somebody shows up from Venezuela, says, I'd like to whatever, I'd like to come into the country. I'm a refugee. And you as a United States taxpayer get to pay their lawyer fees while they get processed.
And while they get everything else. Folks, if this doesn't convince you that everything that's happening on the border right now is intentional and that they hate you as an American citizen, you're no good to them as a deplorable. You're not going to vote for the regime or the uniparty. They want to bring in new blood because that's who's going to support their power moving forward.
Right. And so it's the most awful border bill ever It should have never even been prepared by Republican leadership. They shouldn't have signed off on, because here's going to be the twist. Democrats are going to run on this next election that, yep, the border's broken. Now, keep in mind, 2021, nope, border's fine. 2022, nope, border's fine. 2023, nope, border's fine. Border's not open. And now magically in 2024, when the problem's too big for them to ignore, the problem is the Republicans. We tried to pass legislation. Never mind, Joe Biden could just undo his executive orders and we'd be back to good. But they're going to campaign and they're going to try to make it seem like Republicans didn't do it. So the question comes then, Todd, why would Republicans sign on for this shithole of a bill?
Because most Republicans in Washington, D.C. are sellouts, cowards, they're spineless, they're traitors. They're just as bad as the Democrats once they get to Washington, D.C., Jason.
They are. The other piece to it is they tied a huge financial package for Ukraine and Israel.
You don't say.
Right. And it's tied to this bill. And Republicans are and Democrats are super desperate to get this aid package.
Now why is that?
I was going to say, Todd, why do you think they're so interested in that?
Seems to me like that to go to war, you have to pay someone to produce munitions and military equipment. And gosh, Jason, I don't know. It seems like 70 years ago, we were warned about something called the military industrial complex coming to power, which could then send lobbyists to DC, fund your campaign, get rich no matter who wins or loses in these wars. Seems like there's a lot in place already that would encourage behavior like this, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's funny. You might be asking yourself, like, why on earth do we care so much about some territorial dispute on the other side of the world in a country that most people couldn't even point to? Which that's fun test. If you're ever talking to somebody in the wild who's really concerned about Ukraine, pull up an unlabeled map on your phone and go, do me a favor, point to Ukraine. And they won't even know which country it is.
Jason, I love this test. Why should we care so much about another country's borders? Or ask, should we care about another country's borders? They're going to get so fired up like, yeah, we should defend Ukraine's sovereignty. Why wouldn't we defend them from invasion? And then just flip it around to what's going on at home right here. And they will look at you like a deer in headlights.
Right. So then it's funny, as all this money they're talking about, now they're going to try to push through the standalone bill just to finance stuff without even the border stuff, which I will say the border stuff they propose should never be considered or never be put into law. It's awful. It is awful and will destroy this country. But so then they're going to push through this financial aid package. And then you got to say, okay, we all know why we're doing this, but it would be nice if somebody told you, like sometimes you want to see. And Todd, did we figure out why that is?
Thank you for this ego and this narcissist coming out. Where is he, the senator from exactly? Angus King is his name.
Angus King is a senator in Maine.
Senator from Maine. That tells you all you need to know right away. So Susan Collins, Angus King, Maine produces these, quote, Republican, unquote, senators. You know exactly where they're coming from. But he tells you why we need to support Ukraine, because it's good for the American economy, Jason. He is actually helping America. All of us rural, manufacturing, blue-collar types, we need jobs too. So he's delivering that for us.
Yeah. Should we play the clip, Todd?
Let's play the clip here.
Ooh, you got the transition down.
I think the first thing to say is there's $60 billion that in the overall that says Ukraine, but $48.4 billion of that 60 actually goes into our defense industry. In other words, it goes to the Pentagon to pay to replenish the ammunition and arms that we've sent, and to buy new arms and ammunition going to Ukraine. In other words, it goes right back into our economy. It's not like we're sending a big check to Ukraine. They're getting a limited amount for some of the purposes that they have for paying doctors and teachers and things like that. But the vast bulk of it, 48 out of 60, goes right back into the U.S. economy. It's going to create jobs here in the country. That's something that people aren't talking about.
Todd?
I mean, folks, I hope you understand what he's actually saying here. He is trying to convince you that supporting the military-industrial complex and sending $50 billion of your tax dollars over to Ukraine because it helps our economy at the end of the day. That has to be one of the most outlandish positions to ever hold, but he enunciates it and he's proud of it because he thinks he's actually doing us a service.
Yeah, so let's just put this in perspective. One, we're going to send $12 billion to Ukraine. And like he mentions, for their doctors and their
No strings
hospitals.
attached.
Yeah, no strings attached, all that stuff. So why on earth are we paying for that? Would be question one. Question two, $48 billion is going to go to companies that we deem part of the military industrial complex, people that make guns and boots and tanks and stuff like that. Yes, they will employ Americans. Yes, they will also make record breaking profits. Yes, they will probably contribute to this senator's campaign. They're going to hire this senator probably to give a speech at their annual meeting. That's how the grift works. Imagine voting on a bill for 48 billion frickin' dollars to go to a handful of companies that you know you will benefit from. You should be thrown in jail. This should be illegal. And I guarantee that on top of the campaigns and the kickbacks and whatever they get, every time one of these guys leaves, they end up going to work for one of these clowns. So he right out tells you the story. Anybody that doesn't see how this is going down, I don't know how to make it more obvious for you.
I don't know either. This video, this audio clip, this 1 minute clip is so enlightening. And if you still support the effort in Ukraine, look, I feel terrible for what's happening in Ukraine. I've seen reports of 1 million men have been slaughtered at the meat grinder over there. None of them deserve to die the way they have. But when you talk about the war over there and why it's still going on, this is exactly it, because your elected officials are giving $50 billion to all these munitions manufacturers, defense contractors. And remember, to put this in context, he's going to send $60 billion in sum total to support Ukraine. And the number for Trump's wall when he was president was just $5 billion. I mean, the staggering amount of money that we have sent overseas since they said no to the border wall is unfathomable.
Right. And it's just, like I say, folks, it's just remarkable. So hopefully you can see the grift is on with all this money we're trying to send to foreign countries, and it needs to stop. And in the House and the Senate, it was funny because how this came about, Republicans said, we're not going to send money overseas until you give us a border bill. And then they agreed to a really horrible border bill that didn't pass. Republicans were even willing to send this money if you gave us a good border bill. Frankly, because they get it on the back end from the donors and from the military industrial complex. But just truly, truly remarkable stuff.
Jason, I'm curious, would you take the package that says our border is secure, no more illegals, and $60 billion to Ukraine? I mean, are we willing to take a compromise at this point just to secure our border?
I was going to say, in the House, if you actually want to go look for hope, the House passed great legislation earlier this year called HR 2. You can just go on the Google, search HR 2, and you can actually read the context of the bill. Very good, very common sense legislation. It reinforces how many people we let in. It clarifies what the amnesty claims are and really limits it to people that are being persecuted or killed in their home country. It specifically closes the gap of, oh, we're just poor, so we want to come to America. Very common sense. And it also has some built-in pieces where it makes sure we can afford it, because that's why because Todd, let's be honest, why do Democrats care about this now?
Why do they care about the border all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Well, I remember when AOC cared about the border a lot when Trump was president. She was crying down there. Kind of disappeared for most of Biden's administration, but now it's an election year because, look, the border has got to be one of the biggest stories right now. It's one of the things that's most on people's minds. Democrats are not stupid. They might be evil, but they're not dumb. They know that this is going to play well. And like you said, Jason, they almost got the upper hand in the narrative because we tried to solve the border problem. Here we were, guys. We were sending a bill to Congress, and those dastardly Republicans said no to us. Now it's their fault that nothing's getting fixed.
Yeah, and like I say, why is the border really being a topic of conversation? Because they started sending these migrants to these sanctuary cities that have these very generous welfare programs. And now they're regular citizens they're giving up their welfare programs because
Their community center space. They're not allowed to go to the airport or school sometimes. They shut down a school in New York for a day to house these illegals coming through. Look, you and I want them to feel the pain, but I just hate that more people aren't seeing through the fact that, like, this is such an obvious ploy. The Democrats do not care about the border. They simply care about getting your vote and putting the blindfold over you right now. But I do want Democrat voters to feel the pain of their voting. There are consequences. If you want to be a sanctuary city, you want to have open borders, good. Send them all your way.
Right. Yeah. And I'm 100% on board with that. If you think that we should let everybody in and pay for them, by all means, have at it.
But you know what they will never do? They will never unlock their own front door and let them in and feed them at their kitchen table or write them a check. That's too hard, but it feels really good to steal from you and I, Jason, as taxpayers, and let them use our money and let them use our community spaces to house them.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jason, I want to make a plug too. We're at the bottom of the hour here. Folks, I don't think social media loves this content so much today. If you could do us a huge solid, if you're watching right now and you like what you hear, you like our program, you check in every week, hit like, hit share, send this to a larger network here because, like I said, big tech, they're not loving the fact that we're exposing the border. We're going to be exposing Joe Biden in just a second. So do us a solid if you're liking what you hear today. Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say we have a little tracker on the side and you can tell how much reach it gets. And yeah, Facebook especially really doesn't like what we're talking about today.
You know, you're over the target.
We're over the target. Hey, let's go into the next thing that we're going to talk about the American justice system being broken.
And pop an image up while we're talking here, folks. We'll cover this in a second here while we discuss a few things.
Right. So late yesterday afternoon, when the media news cycle is spinning wildly, they released the Joe Biden classified document report. It's available online at the Department of Justice. It's about 300 pages. And it was funny because Todd was doing something else. He was with his kids. And I'm reading this document and I'm like, this is crazy. Look at these pictures. Oh my gosh. So folks, we're gonna kind of break this down and we're gonna read. So the first image you see is Joe Biden's garage where he stored classified documents. If you see that pile of white boxes in the middle by the ladder, that contains the classified documents that we're going to be referencing. Todd, thoughts on that?
Folks, classified documents stored right there in the open here. You'll recall that he shared his home with his son at the time, too. His son happened to be on the board of Burisma, happened to be making a lot of money selling artwork, happened to have access to these documents. Maybe it was purely a coincidence.
Right. So the documents were stored. They weren't really sure what, how, when they got there.
Is that storage?
Right. And now you guys remember when they found the documents in Mar-a-Lago, which were in a basement with video surveillance in the back corner in a locked room, and we heard endlessly how, I can't believe we could do this. I can't believe we could do that. Trump needs to go for jail. I mean, the news was breathlessly reporting it. Todd, I was looking at the news this morning. Did you see this image anywhere?
I didn't see any of these images. Folks, we have a lot of images here. This isn't anywhere. And Jason, I don't want to do the spoiler here about why this isn't going to go anywhere in terms of how the justice system favored Joe Biden in this case. I'll let you spill the beans in just a second here. But no, I didn't see the story anywhere. I do keep hearing about Trump's indictments, though, and I keep hearing about how he is a corrupt criminal. And again, it stems back to the Mar-a-Lago in part where, he had nuclear codes. He was going to sell these. Why did he have these documents? And again, it can't be said enough. Donald Trump was president. He had legal authority to have these documents in his possession. Folks, when you see these binders here, I'll just clip up. Let's pop something up as well. Again, there's some really fancy storage in Biden's house here. He has these from his time as vice president. There is no constitutional authority to have these documents. That can't be said enough because that's the crux of the whole issue as well.
Right. So if you look and you say to yourself, referring back to Mr. Yost is never going to see this image. Mr. Yost is never going to see this garage, realize it's just in the garage. Joe Biden gave a speech last night about 7:30 responding to this. Joe Biden said this was secure, it was under lock and key. Folks, this is the desk that it was stored in, and these are pictures right from the report, once again available on the government website. Todd, did you see that plastered across the news?
Nowhere. No. I heard a lot about how Trump's a threat to democracy still. I didn't see anything on Joe Biden. And Jason, we don't have clips of Biden today. He couldn't even get through the speech. It was well after sunset time for his state of being here. And again, not spilling the beans. I'll let you get to that. It's kind of connected here, but speech was god awful. Folks, I do not see on that cardboard box a place to put a lock and a key. I just don't see how you can consider that secure.
Right. I could be wrong. It doesn't look
Maybe
very
cardboard
secure.
boxes are made differently in Delaware. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I got a few of them boxes. And I mean, the garage, like we've seen, is Corvette in the garage. Let's pull up a few more pictures.
Let's see, folks. It looks like the dates were cut off here, unless you're able to see something different. The FBI came 2 different times: December 20th of 2022, and then back again in late January of 2023. They were at this house for a good month at least, going through everything, going through all of his folders, cabinets, garages, rooms, offices. This stuff was scattered everywhere. And then just to make sure that we're looking at the same notebooks, oh, Jason, here's Joe Biden using those classified documents in a meeting.
Yeah, so if you flip back to the previous image, so these are notebooks full of Joe Biden's notes that he took when sitting in confidential briefings. And then if you see the notebooks with the pages sticking out, those were the pages he got at those meetings. Kind of like we've all had jobs. So you get the meetings, you get the notes, you kind of leave them in there, throw them in your notebook. And he saved all his personal notebooks with all his personal notes. Now, full disclosure, there is some legal discussion if you get to keep your personal notes, if the information's not classified, all that sort of thing. And I'm sure if this were President Trump, Todd, everybody would be saying, well, yeah, like this should totally be a thing.
I just know that Trump and Biden are treated so equally in the eyes of the media and the law, Jason. So
right. All right, let's go to the next one.
I think that's all of our pictures here that we got. I think this might be my favorite one.
So this is where the boxes were in the shed. These are more. Yeah, I think you showed those already. There's about 20 different pictures in there,
but they're everywhere. Jason, it's not just like it was in one box in one room in a locked closet. He has these documents scattered throughout the room. And again, Jason, this is just his residence. Let's not forget that he had other documents at the Penn Center, which happened to be funded by the Chinese at the time. So connect those dots as you will. I will not say it out loud. We have a smart audience, though.
We do, yeah. And so as I'm reading through this thing and I'm seeing the pictures and I'm like, holy crap, this is really, really bad. So then I start reading. I kind of did a scroll through, saw the pictures, start reading a few things. And then I get to my favorite part on page 219. So the first 200 pages of the report are talking about his interviews, where they found the documents, all that kind of stuff. And folks, I'm going to take a minute just to read the charging reason, because today you're hearing the mainstream media say, well, Joe Biden they weren't going to charge him. He wasn't responsible, or they make it sound like Joe Biden was innocent. So if you read the actual charging documents on page 219 into 220, third, as discussed to some extent above, Mr. Biden will likely present himself to the jury, as he did in the interview in his office, as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. While he is and must be accountable for his actions, he is, after all, the President of the United States. Based on our direct observations of him, Mr. Biden is someone for whom many jurors will want to search for reasonable doubt. It would be difficult to convince a jury they should convict him, by then a former president who will be well into his 80s, of a serious felony that requires a state of mental wistfulness. To read that again, he will present himself as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with poor memory.
There is so much to take away from that. The number one thing, Jason, is they admit his guilt.
Right.
He's guilty. Folks, did you not take that out? Joe Biden is guilty of a felony, and it is okay because he is a Democrat.
And he is an elderly, well-meaning old man.
Yeah, I did a video for us today, Jason, on our Rumble channel there. I think this might, I don't think it'll go anywhere, but I am curious what if this is a new legal defense now? Like, I didn't know, so apparently ignorance under the law is an appropriate defense now, but I didn't know any better, because how can they really disprove your senility or your memory lapse? They can't get inside your head. Unless Elon Musk got his Neuralink in there, like, sorry, cops, I don't remember a thing. I'm not even pleading the fifth. I truly do not remember. Take these cuffs off.
I was going to say, I was talking to my wife last night, and I'm famous for bad memory. That's why I always write stuff down and set notes and alarms. and I'm like, dude, I can get away with like so much stuff now. This is spectacular. So now just some information further on the in the report. So it quotes Joe Biden. Reporter, when you saw the photograph of the top secret documents laid out on the floor at Mar-a-Lago, what did you think to yourself? Look at that image. We've all seen this interview, right? And especially your lefty friends saw this plastered on everything. Mr. Biden's response: how could that possibly happen? How could anyone be so irresponsible? And I thought, what data that may compromise sources and methods? By this, I mean the names of people who were held or that, etc. Because Joe Biden mumbled, it is totally irresponsible. So they even quote that Joe Biden knows that, like, and we all saw the interviews of him with Trump. How irresponsible. How could you do that? So read it further in the report. Mr. Biden's emphatic and unqualified conclusion that keeping marked classified documents unsecured in one's home is totally irresponsible because it may compromise sources and methods applies equally to his own decision to keep his notebooks at home in unlocked and unauthorized containers. These notebooks, like the marked documents, contain classified information, the unauthorized disclosure of which could compromise intelligence sources and methods and damage national security. So Joe Biden admits it would be wrong, and they're calling that out. And Mr. Biden's public statements during his vice presidency and after demonstrate he understands classified information, not merely marked classified documents. These statements undercut his purported belief that he could lawfully retain the notebooks. And folks, they're not charging him. And Todd, why are they not charging him?
Oh, because he has a memory lapse and he's going to be too old. Jason, by then he'll just be a former president. He'll be in his 80s. What's the point? But the other more nefarious reason, Jason, is that he wouldn't get a jury to prosecute him. And folks, we need to appreciate this fact as well. This is how the law will be moving forward. You can see in the case of Donald Trump, when they were seeking indictments, why they chose New York, why they chose certain areas in Georgia. They were going in districts where they knew the jury pool would be slanted. You could bring up the Chauvin trial as well. For no reason should Derek Chauvin's trial have been held in Hennepin County at the site of where that crime took place, or alleged crime, I'm going to say here. Facebook, disregard everything I'm going to say about Derek Chauvin in just a second here. But they always choose places where they know the jury will rule in their favor. Look at the Washington, D.C. court with the illegal immigration stuff that we're watching. There's always a reason. Moving forward, this is how the law is going to be applied, and you need to look out for it. Be careful where you live. Be careful where you do things, because if you're in a community where that jury pool skews heavily blue, you're in a lot of trouble, even though you are probably innocent.
Now, moving on to the next hits. This is all from the report once again. So Facebook, don't fact check us. So another part, there is evidence that Mr. Biden willfully retained the classified Afghan documents. In a recorded conversation February 16, 2017 at Mr. Biden's rental home, Mr. Biden told Mr. I can't pronounce it. It starts with a Z.
I want to hear you try it. Can you try to pronounce it, Jason?
Zawitzer, that Mr. Biden had found, quote, all of the classified stuff downstairs. According to what Mr. Biden told Zawitzer, all the classified stuff relating to President Obama's 2009 decision to surge American troops to Afghanistan and to a pivotal moment when Mr. Biden sent Obama his handwritten Thanksgiving memo opposing the troop surge photos of his Virginia home show that the lowest level downstairs, where Mr. Biden told Zwitzker he had found all the classified stuff, include in the rooms that Mr. Biden used to work in and storage spaces. So they actually have Joe Biden talking to. Remember when we heard how Trump shared like the nuclear codes with some reporter and he needed to be thrown in Gitmo for it? Folks, Joe Biden had documents from Afghanistan that he shared with the writer who is writing his book. He admits to it. Like, he admits to it. This is ironically a recorded conversation that they were able to pull from that they don't dispute. Further, going back to the report, Mr. Biden had a strong motive to keep the classified Afghanistan documents. He believed Obama's troop surge was a mistake on par with Vietnam. He wanted the record to show he was right about Afghanistan, that his critics were wrong, and that he had opposed Obama's mistaken decision when it was made, that his judgment is sound and mattered most. This evidence provides ground to believe that Mr. Biden willfully retained the classified documents about Afghanistan. If he was not referring to those documents later found in his garage when he told Zwitzker that he had found all the classified stuff, it's really not clear what else Mr. Biden could have been referring to. Todd?
Means, motive, opportunity. Biden checks all those boxes handedly for this committal of a crime. They admit it here in so many ways, Jason. And you're reading what? A couple paragraphs from hundreds of pages of documentation?
Yeah. And then check out this next twist. So the analysis of the evidence, classified notebooks, there is evidence that when Mr. Biden left office, he willfully retained his notebooks. That is, he knew he kept classified information in notebooks stored in his house, and he knew he was not allowed to do so. There is also evidence that Mr. Biden willfully disclosed this information to his writer by reading it to him aloud. We conclude. So you're sitting there and you're going, okay, he kept it. He knew he kept it. He knew he shouldn't keep it. And he shared it with somebody that we were told when this was Donald Trump, like, this is the greatest sin ever. So all that's happened. We conclude that this evidence does not establish his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Therefore, we decline prosecution based on the retentions of the notebook and disclosure of information in there.
Hold on a second, Jason. I know when we first opened up this bit here, we talked about how he was too old and senile and his memory was poor. Everything you just read seems to confirm to me that Joe Biden knew exactly what he was doing, why he was doing it. He had an understanding that that wasn't right because he said that about Trump before. Am I missing something?
Yes, Todd, you're missing the next part, which is, how do they justify this, right? I mean, if you're in the audience, aren't you going, wait a second, this is ridiculous?
Are you not screaming at Todd and Jason right now?
Right, like,
Lock
you guys
him
got to
up.
be lying. So B, the evidence does not prove beyond a reasonable doubt Mr. Biden willfully retained the notebooks. We do not believe this evidence would meet the government's burden at trial to prove Mr. Biden knew his handling of notebooks broke the law. What? So we expect Mr. Biden's defense would be he thought his notebooks were personal property and he was allowed to take them home, even if they contained classified information. Enough evidence support this defense to establish reasonable doubt.
Can I just say something, Jason?
Go for it, Todd.
I am on pick any law website. Folks, do this for yourself. I think we all know it. In the United States, a legal principle is that ignorance of the law is not an excuse for breaking the law. So
Right.
Their whole argument that Joe Biden, because he thought he had the ability to do this, that is not a legal defense.
Correct. And what's funny, too, is part of Trump's defense is that he was president. He could declassify the information, but he also is making this same thing. And President Trump legally had the authority to declassify all this information. Joe Biden didn't, as a senator or as vice president. President Trump, therefore, had the ability to keep the stuff. He also could use the personal defense, like, hey, I thought I could take it. I thought it was my personal stuff, just like Joe Biden is using. But that's not what they're going to buy. And right now, if any lefty, if Mr. Yost made it this far in the podcast, he's going to tell me how different the Trump case is than the Joe Biden's case is. And they're going to do all this really detailed, specific little things. He lied, he didn't. Folks, Joe Biden didn't even know where this shit was. This was in like 12 spots in his house. He had no security over this. The lack of care of this, if you're going to make an issue of it, I guess is the point. Like, if you're not going to prosecute Joe Biden, like, this should be an easy one not to prosecute President Trump. But now for the end of it, we also believe some of the evidence that supports reasonable doubt for the classified Afghanistan documents all supports reasonable doubt for the notebooks, including Mr. Biden's cooperation with the investigation, his diminished faculties in an advancing age, and his sympathetic demeanors. These factors will likely make it difficult for jurors to conclude he had criminal intent.
What can you do except shake your head, Jason? This is another time to highlight the fact Donald Trump, the saying goes, everything they said about Trump is true for Joe Biden and Democrats. This is so remember dates. The Mar-a-Lago raid took place in August of 2022, and they had to set the narrative and get you all outraged over classified documents. Trump bad, Trump did the documents thing. And then it goes away. They searched Biden's home at the end of 22 and early 2023. And by then, they'd already cycled through your outrage here. So folks couldn't get upset again. They'd already directed and associated in their head Trump classified documents. So when they rolled out the news of Biden and classified documents, it didn't stick because it didn't need to anymore because people's emotional capacity was maxed out. I'm mad at Trump over documents. This Biden stuff, it's just not the same thing. And so once again, the media set it all up. I don't think the timelines are an accident. Trump first to get the outrage out of the way, to associate this idea with Trump. And then when it comes around to actually Biden committing the crimes, there's no more room to get upset about it.
And to put this in perspective, if you look at the Trump case, so what they allege in the court documents, they boxed all this stuff up in the same moving boxes. They loaded on a truck. They drove it to Mar-a-Lago. In Mar-a-Lago, it was put under lock and key in a secured room. At some point, it moved from one secure room to another secure room in the basement. In one of the basements, it was actually in a bathroom. So you saw pictures with the bathroom. And everybody's, oh my God, I can't believe it's in a bathroom. That bathroom was like in the basement, locked up behind 3 sets of doors under camera. The guy that moved the boxes is facing felony charges. So the guy that moved the boxes from one secure room to another secure room is facing felony charges. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's house, you can see from the pictures, he's got classified shit all over his house. Like, he's got it spread every which way from Sunday, no security. Last night when he did his press conference, he blamed his staff that it was their fault. He didn't know. It's truly remarkable. And like I say, I don't know if Joe Biden should be prosecuted for these classified documents. It sounds like they found classified documents. Mike Pence, Ted Cruz, a bunch of other members of the House and Senate. But if you're not going to prosecute Joe Biden, who didn't even have the authority to have any of these documents, clearly secured them less effectively than President Trump, how on earth are you going to charge President Trump? And that's why the title of this week's episode is America's Justice System is Broken Beyond Repair. Because the fact of the matter is, half the country is not going to see these pictures. They aren't going to read those comments. Those comments clearly show a man of diminished capacity. And shout out to Bennett. Excellent question. Too senile to charge, yet competent enough to be president.
Yeah. Wrap your head around that one.
Yeah, so I'm some dude from Minnesota. Todd's some dude from Minnesota. I sit there last night drinking my Split Rock coffee. By the way, hey, Todd, where can people get Split Rock coffee?
SplitRockCoffee.com. Use promo code TODD10 to save instantly on your great coffee. Subscribe today so you get that easy, don't have to think about a recurring shipment right to your front door. Don't go to the grocery store again for coffee. Just have it sent to you. And by the way, we got the Split Rock guys in the chat today. Drop them a note and check out their website, splitrockcoffee.com.
And I got to say, I said I was drinking it in the afternoon. Split Rock coffee is really low acid, which means you can drink it all day without getting that coffee stomach. But anyway, so I'm just some chowder from Minnesota. By the way, all those things I was reading to you guys, it's available on my Twitter timeline at JRob from MN. And so I took screenshots. It was funny. We were chatting back and forth on the computer, like, holy shit, I can't believe this. So one would think that our news media outlets would see this, read this, and we would go, holy cow, folks, we have a problem. But Todd, what did the mainstream media do?
Oh, Joe Biden is fine. It's interesting, Jason, the way that they're playing defense on this one. Look, there is no defensible position here. Joe Biden messed up. And Jason, I do want to add on, I don't think Joe Biden should be prosecuted necessarily. It would be nice, but honestly, for most of the American presidents, I would love to see them prosecuted for war crimes more than having classified documents or a whole host of other things. It is too bad, though, that because you're old and a former president, that's a defense for Joe Biden. It'd be interesting if they applied that to Trump, who is also older and a former president, but that doesn't seem to be a consistent logic in their repertoire here. But no, the media ran full cover, no mention of the documents. However, Joe Biden is still young and fit because he can ride a bicycle. Should we do that one?
Let's do this one.
Along with the standardness of, I don't recall, is the standardness of prosecutors and or litigators being annoyed by it. And part of the peak that you read in it is that peak, right? I mean, he's frustrated and angry that he didn't get more. Yeah. But the other thing, you mentioned this, we should just be clear here, right? Like, age is the central narrative question here that this all revolves around in terms of its political repercussions, the way the news happened today, the questions being asked him by multiple figures there. And in the end, what makes it such a useful political tool for people that want Donald Trump to be elected or want him not to be reelected is that the fact of his age is not something you can rebut. Mm-hmm. You can't tack to, if someone says you're too far left, you can tack to the center. The man is 80 years old.
He rides a bike.
He is the age he is. And so it's a very useful political attack for that reason.
What? I don't know anything you just said.
So, folks, I read the entire indictment thing. Shout out to my wife for letting me read it last night, too. And like I say, go on the website and read it if you want. 300 and some pages. It's not as bad as it sounds because there isn't that many words on the page. But I clipped out the reasons. They clearly said this is a man of diminished mental capacity. And that's why they're not charging him. They don't even refute that what he did was legal or illegal. They clearly say he did it. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. But we won't be able to convict him because he's a potato. So these people on this show are spouting propaganda. And guys like Mr. Yost, and people like this, they're going to read that. And if they weren't lazy and had half a brain or listened to shows like ours, they would say, holy cow, this stuff really existed in those documents. And like I say, they're all my Twitter timeline, screenshots of them. If you want to fact check me, like, oh, it doesn't really say that. But this is what I mean about the media is the enemy of the people.
And Jason, look at the chyron down below. Biden on DocsProbe. The matter is now closed. They are running with the headline that there's going to be no prosecution, and they're going to lead you to believe that there was no crime committed. They just conveniently leave out the fact that absolutely crimes were committed. Again, reference the documents yourselves if you don't believe it here. But because he's too old, they don't want to prosecute. And then the media just kind of fast forwards from everything to like, oh, case is closed.
Right. And so, folks, this is why Todd and I do what we do. That's why we call this freedom from the press. That's why we asked us to support our work, share our show, because there is at least half the population that doesn't know this happened. They're going to watch this trash on CNN and MSNBC. They're not going to know, holy cow, like 10 spots in this indictment, they called him mentally unfit, and therefore we can't prosecute him. The media is the enemy of the people. But we've got to frame up for what the next attack is going to be. So there's been a ton of news. Last night there was Tucker and interviewing Putin, Trump's Jeannie Carroll. We suspect today or early next week they're going to come out with the judgment about his business thing, which we could do a whole episode on. It's hot garbage. But he's going to lose. Like, just, Trump's going to lose. I'm guessing they're going to ping him for $500 million and tell him he's got to shut down his business in New York, which of course will result in an appeal, because the goal of the left isn't to ultimately win, it's to tie him up. But the next thing, yesterday morning was really interesting because Colorado kicked President Trump off the ballot. And to me, I'm like, okay, this might be a bridge too far. And it was funny. I do the Wayne Dupree podcast Monday through Friday. We've been talking about this, and I'm like, this is just such as, like, we know it's going to get to the Supreme Court. We know they're going to review it, and we know that they're going to have to make a determination. And before the hearing yesterday, I remember saying, like, to me, this is going to be one of those bridge too fars. You're even going to get the crazy lefties on the Supreme Court who think that they're going to, like, they don't even know what a woman is, right? Like that, like famously, Ketanji Brown, like, what's a woman? I don't know. But I'm like, these people are even going to say this is a bridge too far. So yesterday morning on the SupremeCourt.gov website, you could actually listen to this hearing. And I'll tell you, folks, if you want some entertainment, like it's about an hour and a half. It was good. First half, Trump lawyer presents his arguments, and they give him some pushback, which always happens. These things like, why should I pick your side? And they even give him a hard time. They say, like, there's a few arguments here you could make that you're not making. And he's like, yeah, I know we can make those. We mentioned them, but that's not a strong argument as this argument. But then they get to the Colorado guy. And for those who are old enough to remember watching Mike Tyson fights, this was a Mike Tyson fight. They all were just destroying that guy. Todd, what did you think about that Supreme Court thing?
Honestly, it gives me a little hope, a little glimmer of hope. I mean, we have far left activist judges on the court, but this was, like you said, a bridge too far. I'm just going to read from NBC. Again, not a right-wing outlet covering, again, not right-wing justices, but just to point out how absurd the Colorado case is that it makes these Biden nominees look competent. So it says, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, one of the liberals, appeared to agree, again, with the arguments getting presented by the conservatives, asking why the authors of the 14th Amendment would have designed a system that could result in interim disuniformity in this way, where we have elections pending in different states suddenly saying you're eligible, you're not. I mean, it is so obvious. You can't run a country of 50 independent republics coming together and all decide in different ways. You can be president, you cannot be on the ballot, you can't be president, this and that. And I want to go a step further here too. It talks about appearing to be probing the difficulty of determining what counts as an insurrection and whether the process could be abused. And they go on to cite because at least one Republican congressman has suggested that Biden could have violated Section 3, again, being about protecting the border and committing insurrection by failing to secure the border here. So they see where the slippery slope can lead to. If what Donald Trump was an insurrection and now insurrections count for getting you off the ballot, well, we're going to call everything else an insurrection if you're not adhering strictly to the Constitution, because now you're not following your oath of office or supporting foreign governments. If you're sending money overseas, they all recognize that, oh boy, this could open up a can of worms that we're not ready to deal with.
Well, and it's really interesting too, and I should have grabbed the clip for it. They asked the Colorado guy, they said, doesn't this open the door, like, where you can call anything an insurrection? And because people aren't in lockstep that January 6th was insurrection. Many people think it was a riot. Some people think it was an insurrection. I mean, I think it divides pretty close to 50-50 on political ideology.
But Jason, what we think is an insurrection is a lot different from what a court decides, someone having been charged with insurrection and then found guilty of an insurrection. With Donald Trump has neither of those to check the boxes. There are people saying he committed an insurrection, these idiots on MSNBC, but that's as far as we've gone. And of course, right. The idiot judges in Colorado, they said he was an insurrectionist.
But my point was, his answer was very telling, because he looked at the Supreme Court. So you're in front of the Supreme Court, the head legislative body of America. And he goes, well, yeah, some of those people might bring frivolous claims of insurrection. And I'm like, you are such a self-righteous SOB that you, excuse me, you won't even concede that some people think you are my stuff is right. It was just, it shows the left's worldview and how destructive it is. So my prediction, mark it down here first, going to be 9-0, saying you can't do this. I don't know what their legal reasons will be. I think probably disenfranchisement or something will be baked into it. I think one of the conservatives will write an opinion about like this kind of like charge them with insurrection if you want to enforce it. But what that's going to result in, folks, just to prepare yourself, is that's going to result in them wanting to attack the Supreme Court, because the left won't stop until they've assaulted all of our institutions. Supreme Court's next.
And Supreme Court's the last one, really. I mean, it's 6 people on the Supreme Court now standing up for freedom and oftentimes selling out our freedom in various ways. Amy Coney Barrett decides to side with the left sometimes. We lose a big 5-4 decision. Roberts isn't exactly a stalwart, but at least there are 6 individuals that, for the most part, can be counted on to do somewhat constitutional things. But that's it. And the left can't have that. They need full institutional power and control across the spectrum.
And once we get past the Supreme Court, they're going to go to attack. Todd, should we play the video of the next thing that's on
Here we
tap?
go, folks. They've been trying to do this for years, but we keep getting closer, it seems like.
What
This just
happened
dropped
today, Katie
today.
Fang? You were in the room where it happened. Talk about what you expect to happen. It felt to me like the justices had already decided to keep him on the ballot, just looking for a reason why. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think we all know where it's going to go, which is why I think the conversation you just had with Sheldon Whitehouse is so important, Joy, because I think we need to move beyond now to a conversation about the Electoral College.
Yeah.
Why? Because Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution allows Colorado to do what it does, to decide how to select its presidential electors. Brett Kavanaugh conveniently and hypocritically today waxed about disenfranchisement of voters, but that is exactly what SCOTUS did in Bush v. Gore in 2000 when it told the Florida Supreme Court that it couldn't decide how to do its state's election in terms of a presidential election. Bush v. Gore federalized a presidential election in violation of the United States Constitution. That is why Al Gore lost, because Bush got the Electoral College votes. The Electoral College is disenfranchising the voters. If you truly want to do what Brett Kavanaugh says, which is, quote, one person, one vote under equal protection, then you got to have a popular vote. Because what's happening is they're federalizing elections through what happened today in the Colorado case. States should have states' rights. It works for abortion, right?
Yeah,
hey, let's take abortion back to the states.
Yeah.
But when it comes to not having Trump on the ballot, if you want to have a patchwork result, that's exactly what the Constitution contemplated. And Joy, my last word is that it's what the Constitution wants. If you don't.
Jason, I don't think any of them have ever read the Constitution, and they certainly like to cherry pick the Constitution. I'd like to ask them about the Second Amendment, but that's a different conversation.
Right. So, folks, get ready. The attack is coming. The 9-0 report going to come in. I'm going to say it takes about 3 weeks, around 1st of March. Election's going to continue to be heating up. We're getting around Super Tuesday, and then clowns like this are going to call to expand the Supreme Court and get away from the Electoral College, because the left is never going to be happy till they destroy everything.
There's a reason. We should do a show on the Electoral College, actually, Jason. That could be a good hour about diving into where it came from, why it's so important, why it's so invaluable to our freedom and our republic. So we won't dispute everything here. I think maybe we save this clip for a future episode, but holy smokes, folks, I think in our lifetime, we're going to see a real threat to the Electoral College. There is already, if you want to look it up, a national election vote compact. I'd have to look up the exact phrasing for it, but there are, I believe, 20 states or so signed on already that are willing to give their electors to whoever wins the national vote total overall, essentially overriding the will of the people in their states. So you want to talk about federalizing elections. This clown up here is trying to make you afraid that not having Trump on the ballot in Colorado is a threat to democracy. If you live in Colorado, if this compact gets enough momentum, if you live in Colorado and vote for Trump, it won't matter if someone else against Trump has more votes in the national popular election. Talk about disenfranchisement, but that's another show.
Yeah, and we'll go into it on future episodes, because this attack on the institutions, it's not going to stop. Folks, we live in really interesting times. I wanted to mention quick a project we're starting. We think part of what saves the nation is connecting with God. And I think everybody can say, as the nation continues to drift further and further away from God, that we continue to lose things as a country. And one of the new projects we're working on today was the first day we put articles on it, thechristiantribune.com. We're trying to create real positive stories, faith-based stories about people that are living their faith and that are trying to make a positive difference in the world. So I'd encourage you to check that out. Give us some feedback on what you think, what you like. Like I say today, first, it's still a work in progress. First articles just dropped on there today. So that'll be kind of where I would end my thoughts for the week. We live in troubled times. Be with those you love and make sure that you find your faith, because that's what's going to get us through this next 9-10 months are going to be really wild. And we're going to be there for you, bringing you the facts that you need to know.
Absolutely.
With that,
I don't know how to top a conversation about the big guy, but Jason, I'm glad you brought the energy down a little bit. You and I, we crescendo in these episodes. We get so worked up, folks. There's so much nonsense out there. But to JR's point, turn off the show, turn off the television, just check out for a little bit and just reconnect with the things that are most important in your life: family, your faith, your friendships. That's going to be what saves this country if enough of us focus on those things.
Absolutely. And on that, I'm going to give a shout out. I'm going to give Carol the last word of the episode. Then we're getting out of here. Carol Hill, Biden can't be tried for crimes, but he can be president. Clown Town.
Make it make sense.
Absolutely, folks. Like and share it.
Have a great
Spread
weekend.
word.